Oh, hi! This week, I'm going to show you all some of my shame, which is my fabric stash, which is extensive, and I didn't even hit all of it in this video, but I wanted to organize and make swatch cards off of all of the fabric I have, because there's a reason I have a lot of clear storage bins, or like I can kind of see what's going on and just like open shelving all over my shop, because I am unfortunately basically out of sight, out of mind. Like I have no object permanence, I guess. I will just entirely forget that I own a lot of fabric, which I know how privileged that is of me, that I have such an abundance of material that I can't keep track of it all. And on the flip side of that, this is a lot of fabric for me, but I know it pales in comparison to many other people's fabric stashes. Everything's relative. It feels like a lot, and I hate that I'll think of a pattern but not even realize that I have the perfect material for it, and then I just don't make that project, or I feel like I need to go out and get something else. This is going to help me keep track of stuff and hopefully help me continue on with my sketching process. I did a whole video about my new methods for coming up with my sewing ideas and really fleshing them out, and having little swatches for things is very, very helpful. And just being able to feel the fabric and not have to take all of my stuff out every single time I want to like check something. This just makes everything much more accessible, much more easy. I can compare different shades of things and like, ooh, does this velvet match this silk charmeuse? I don't know. I'm trying to think of fabric names to sound smart. I'm not even categorizing this by fabric makeup necessarily. It's going to be like knits, wovens, I think velvet, specialty fabric, and then probably all of my fleece. The fleece is the section of fabric I haven't touched yet, but that's also not something I'm gonna just substitute here and there with other materials. We're debating between having sheer woven sleeves on something versus something like a quilting cotton. That could have more wiggle room with it, you know, but that is the next step, is to categorize the fleece. Maybe I'll do it later today. I am not feeling it right now because I spent 7 hours doing what I've already done. And I think it's probably going to be another 2 or 3 to get the fleece sorted out. I just don't have it in me right now. Let's start digging out some of my fabric. I set up a workstation at my cutting table, which I'm very thankful to have, and there's also a table saw at the end. The saw has been lowered. I wasn't in danger of hurting myself or the fabric, but it just extends the surface that I have to work with, so that helped with laying all of this stuff out and measuring it. Speaking of, I did grab a measuring stick. This one is fun because it like is extendable and you fold it up. I don't know if it's maybe the most accurate measuring stick, but I also didn't need absolute precision with this. I just needed a general gist as to what I had. I also grabbed a pair of regular scissors and then my pinking shears, because regular scissors were fine for cutting knit swatches or anything that wasn't going to fray on the edges, and then any of the wovens I did go around with the pinking shears so that I won't just have loose threads shredded everywhere by the end of my use of these swatches. Then I decided to put all the swatches onto index cards, because then I could write some notes. I did play around with the format a little bit, and it took 3 or 4 tries to figure out how I wanted this stuff to be laid out. I was gonna write notes on the opposite side and just have the swatch like dead center on the plain side of the index card, but because I was using Sharpies for notes, it bled through to the other side, and I figured whatever other markers I would swap those out for would do the same. So all the notes are on the same side as the swatch. Swatch is small enough it can just be on one half of the card. It all worked out great. And this way it's actually easier, because then when I'm flipping through the accordion file that I'm going to put all this stuff in, which may not be the best method, I may change my mind down the road. I would consider putting stuff in like a sheet protector, but still having everything on individual cards. The reason I avoided an actual like book with full pages with like multiple swatches per thing is because as I use the swatches, I am super anal retentive about my organization stuff. It's either nothing or everything. I'm either 0 or 60. There's not much in the in-between where everything's either complete chaos or everything is like perfectly folded and in alphabetical or color order. So if I use up a swatch and want to change the panel, I'm going to redo the entire page, and that's going to keep me from updating any of the pages, because that's going to feel like a lot of work, where swapping out one card at a time as I use stuff. And with any cataloging system, I need to leave room for new stuff to come in. So also having things in order in a book, if I got new stuff, I'd want to move things down, and it's too like rigid, where this is a bit looser of a format than an actual booklet. But there's plenty of options for what to do on here. This is just what seemed to make sense for me and got me excited, and I could like wrap my head around better. But yeah, if I had like a photo binder page protector situation that would fit the index cards, I go fuck with that because it's movable. I don't have any of those, but would consider if the accordion file situation doesn't work out. Because this is all I have for the moment anyway. So I put cardboard in here because I used to store cardboard in here for some reason. It was in here for like 15 years and I felt like I needed to keep hanging on to it to make stencils and stuff. You know what I haven't touched in 15 years is any of this cardboard. So this is getting a new life. So those categories I mentioned earlier were like knits will go in one, velvets and like fancier fabrics will go in another. I'll have a whole back category for the fleece that I will eventually swatch. Please hold me accountable for this. I have 5 different pockets I can use. It'll sort itself out. Then I'll only have to do this in little bits as I get new fabric. I'm trying to take more steps to set future me up for success, but it's a lot of work on the back end. Oh, and I am just using like clear cello tape to stick this stuff on. Not every fabric sticks perfectly, but I didn't want something permanent like hot glue on here. And I didn't want to deal with the dry time of some other glues, which is also still permanent. Like the tape is completely removable. So this just seemed like the best option. So a couple of the fabrics I have on my cutting table are fabrics that I've already actually cut swatches for and done the full design in my little sketchbook here. If there's an excess of fabric left over, like more than a yard or so, I will then make a swatch card for it and add it into the bins or somewhere else that I decide to store it in my sewing room. But for the time being, they're just gonna stay out here because I hope / need to just make these projects while they're fresh in my head and I'm excited about it before I lose that gusto. And then these end up sitting here for another 3 years, like all of the other fabric that I own. Then I have these 2 other knits where there's just so much bulk here because one's a sweater fleece and the other one is just a ton of yardage and it's a very like heavy drapey knit and there's just so much of it that it's not gonna fit in the bin reasonably. So I'm just gonna take swatches off of this, make the cards, and then stack those on top of the bins on the shelf they go into because there's a little wiggle room at the top for things such as this. Like this black and white fabric is the biggest amount that I own out of anything, I think, other than possibly that fucking neon pink stretch fleece that I have been cursed with because the fabric store sent me the wrong color fabric. So I ended up with 5 yards of that and they wouldn't take it back. So I've just tried to do a bunch of test garments with it and it just seems like it replenishes itself every time I go through more yardage of it. So both that neon pink fleece and this black and white fabric kind of hurt my eyes to look at. I don't know how it's coming up on camera, but in person it like hurts them a little bit. Oh, and then these taffetas I actually dug out of a different bin. I ended up doing so much other organization that wasn't even on camera here because I just got real hyper focused on the thing and it was one of those, my alarm went off at 1 p.m. I thought it was like 9 a.m. and I hadn't eaten anything or had any water. Cheers, let's hydrate. Anyway, the other fabric sitting here is some taffeta that I was gifted by my fairy god Cheryl. I kept forgetting that I owned because it was under just a pile of velvet and every time I looked in the bin with the velvet I thought, oh yes, that's where all the velvet is. Couldn't possibly be any other type of material in here. Except there was. It was hiding in there the whole time. I say this as if I didn't put it there. So anyway, it deserved to get bolted and put in the bin with some of the other pretty sheer fabrics that I have. This is like the 3rd Christmas season in a row that I have meant to make a very over-the-top holiday dress. And then, as I said, I forget it exists. So anyways, there's some really pretty taffetas that I get to use now. Stinky Bean! Who's the best boy? Who's the stinkiest boy? I know the 2 aren't mutually exclusive, but this dog seems to be aging in reverse because he's going to be 14 in a couple days. And yet, the past couple months, he's decided, oh, we go on walks now. Because it was never something I could get him to do before. We'd like poke around the yard. And if I went out to a brewery or something or a friend's house with him, we'd poke around their yard and their house and stuff. But he never wanted to like go for walks. And now, every single day, he will not let me rest until we venture out. Which is also good for me because then it gets me to go for a walk. I've had him almost 3 years. And only in the past couple months is he like, it's go time, motherfuckers. A little Benjamin Button bean. I didn't know that was an option, but I'll certainly take it. Okay, enough distractions. It's serious business now. Here's the first bin I'm working through, which has all of my knits and novelty fabrics, all like quilting cottons and stuff. Not the plain ones, like the solid color ones, though at the end I did end up putting all of those together because there was enough room because of all the refolding and such. But starting out, my method for this was like these knits and these like novelty fabrics are the ones I'm going to use the most, so they should go in a bin together. I'm sure it had to do with what took up what amount of space when I initially put these together, and then I just didn't rearrange it afterwards. So everything got an overhaul today. And speaking of rearranging, this is the fox fabric that I did in that sketch video I mentioned earlier. So since that has a dedicated swatch already taken out and a page in the sketchbook with the idea, I'm also setting this fabric aside because I want to make this dress sooner than later. So having it out and in my face, so I have to move it every time I do a different project. I think if it's in my way, I'm more likely to do it so that it is then out of my way and I'm not thinking about it anymore. I'm being burdened by its presence. It's like I'm being haunted by ideas that I was excited about and then got distracted by other things. Then it is yardage like this flamingo fabric where I've used the bulk of it to make stuff already, but there's too much to just put in my like fat quarter bin where I have all the fabric that I make zipper pouches and stuff with. It's a lot of smaller pieces. So I decided I would measure out the fully intact yardage, that's like the full width selvage to selvage, and then just make a note that there's scrap bits at either end just to get a general idea on the card how much is left. And then of course I immediately forgot to take a swatch off of this, so I had to unfold it once again. As probably everybody else right now looking at the Marauders map fabric, it makes me sad to see this now. I have so much of it and it was saved for a special project, like that perfect thing. I kept not using it because it was like too important, and now it's kind of the last thing I want to make anything with. Full disclaimer, like I bought this years ago when they first released a Harry Potter collection at Joann's, so I promise this wasn't a recent purchase. By the way, fuck turfs. We don't tolerate any of that shit here. I don't feel as bad owning this like unlicensed Harry Potter fabric that Jeanette sent me because none of the money went to the author. Anyway, as far as fandoms that have only broken my heart with their storytelling and not in their real world moral catastrophes, I also have a bunch of Doctor Who fabric that I also got pretty early on once they announced it. I was also given a gift card for my birthday, whatever year that was. So I think that's the first time I ever bought fabric online, actually. And I just have so much yardage still of the Exploding TARDIS. And to be honest, I can't believe how much of this Dalek fabric I have because I made a whole ass gathered skirt. And then this repeating dark blue TARDIS fabric I completely forgot that I had. Oh, and then I have this Doctor Who flannel. I was debating keeping it with the rest of the Doctor Who fabric, but decided it is a flannel and I'm only gonna use it when I'm in flannel brainstorming mode. So I have a ridiculous amount of flannel as well that I also haven't cataloged yet. So that's gonna go with that. And we'll get organized when I'm feeling up to it. Okay, on to the knits. Will it surprise you that I have a teal fabric? Will it surprise you that the teal fabric is striped? Will it surprise you that I then have a black and white striped fabric, which I think was sent to me by David, but is also definitely something I would have bought at the store. So can't 100% confirm, but thank you. I'm 99% sure you did send it to me. So thank you again. There's still so much of it left and I've made a whole ass full-length dress out of this already. And it wasn't until going to make these swatches that I realized I had two different black knits. Now I did make a point to buy some yardage of plain, neutral, solid color, black, white, and gray fabric, but I definitely didn't realize I already had black knit. And this is why we're making the swatches, friends. It's like when every time I go to the grocery store, I'm like, right, gotta make sure we have ranch dressing so we don't run out. And then there are literally 8 bottles of ranch dressing in the pantry because I can't remember to double check these things before I leave. This is going to keep that from happening with the rest of my fabric. And then I have this very flimsy yellow that's pretty sheer. If you have any suggestions on what I can make with this, because I really don't know. The only reason I bought this, and this is embarrassing to admit now, but you know, you gotta learn somehow. I'm almost entirely self-taught. Where I went to make my first Hogwarts robes, outer fabric was like a black solid woven, you know, quilting weight cotton. But then I think this is what I lined it with. Definitely know better now, but at the time I was like, I don't know, fabric is fabric. We live and we learn, you know? And then it was time to restack everything. So knits on one side, all the other fabrics on the other. There was enough room to finagle this a little bit more afterwards. Before I folded these, everything was packed in super tight and now there's a little more room because I was cognizant of like making sure everything was flat, things weren't all bunched up. Maybe things were spread out across the bolt more so they were folded into thirds instead of fourths, so that reduced some bulk. And I also removed like the fox fabric, things like that. Okay, on to the second bin. Other than the ones on the end, I'm not even entirely sure what's in here. All of this sheer stuff in the middle, I completely forgot existed because for some reason I bought a lot of that kind of fabric early on in my sewing career. And you know what I don't tend to use almost ever is non-stretchy sheer fabric. Ooh, and there's this really thin kind of crepey green fabric, and I'm gonna update my Goon cosplay and add some patches here and there to cover up some iron burn marks that may or may not be on the skirt, but also just make it look a little bit more roughed up. And since I have the exact fabrics I used for that left over, why not put it into the costume. So I set that aside in a separate pile. There's also so little of it that I wouldn't keep it on here anyway. This is something I would use to like line a bag probably, like little zipper pouch makeup bag style thing. Then I found this fabric, which was one of the first fabrics I ever got. I don't know why I bought this. It has yet to be used. As you can see, I've never cut anything off of here. I can't imagine what garmenty thing I would make. It's a little too heavy and animal prints just aren't my thing. So I did end up deciding to put this with some bag fabric because I think it would make a cool purse or something like that. Because I think it's a more heavy duty type of fabric that with maybe some faux leather on the bottom would look really good. So that went to a different home. Then once I removed those from the pile, I started measuring out these lengths of wool that I actually got from a thrift store / vintage shop. Actually, like an antique shop. They just happen to have some vintage fabric bundled up. I think it was 10 bucks for all of this, which is not too bad considering there ended up being 5 or 6 yards here, and it's pretty nice material, so I've certainly spent more on worse. Then I still have so much of this lace from Paris that one of my best friends got me while she was over there. I promise I am putting every bit of willpower I have in me to not go on another Moulin Rouge rant, because it's not like she went there in 1899. She went there in probably 2015. But she's the friend I sang Elephant Love Medley with the most, and also just with the most vigor. We get very dramatic and over the top acting it out. A lot of arm movements. Anyway, then I stumbled upon this red fabric with these kind of yellowy gold dots all over it, and I remember purchasing it because I wanted to add some sleeves. Actually, the video is probably still up and it's probably embarrassing to watch. But I made a Daenerys Targaryen where it was one of those T-Fury shirts where it's like just all the really cool nerdy fandom mashups. I do not online shop much, mostly because it's a very slippery slope. It feels like it's too easy and then I will impulse shop all the time, and that's something I really try to be careful about. So anyway, I had this Daenerys Targaryen shirt where instead of her dragons, there were little Charmanders around her, and it was really cute, and I wanted to make these little like flutter sleeves. So again, it was t-shirt material. I put this non-stretch sheer lacy stuff on to replace the sleeves, and wouldn't you know it, it didn't work out very well. I definitely still have the shirt tucked up in my bin where I store all of the shirts that haven't been made into a t-shirt quilt. Even though I put, what, 30 shirts into that? Is that the first thing I made last year? Oh my goodness. It's wild to think that that was that long ago. I'll put that up here. That's one of my proudest projects, I think, and it gets used every day. Well worth the effort. Anyway, this red sheer fabric, like, I can't remember where I put the scissors I was just using, but I knew exactly where the sleeve scraps from that t-shirt project were, and I immediately dug it out, and then that caused an entire overhaul of other parts of my sewing room I didn't show you because I genuinely just got so caught up in it I forgot what I was initially doing in the first place. I feel like I blacked out and then it was 4 hours later. Now, it wasn't like I was unproductive. I did catalog all of my velvets. That just wasn't quite the priority for the day, and I spent way too much time doing this. But now it all looks so pretty and tidy. Ended up making way more space on the rest of my shelf. I just ended up using my space way more efficiently, so there's more gaps for more fabric to go. And yes, the velvet's very pretty, but oh my god, because it's flocked, I think is the term for it, the fibers that were coming off of this and just getting all over my glasses and in my eyes and up my nose was pretty miserable. But then finally I went back to the original project, which was organizing these bins, which were full of lace at this stage. So this is technically a velvety lace because these polka dots have that kind of flocking fuzzy feel to it. And what makes me sad about this fabric is I got it at a little mom and pop shop called Martin's House of Cloth that just doesn't exist anymore. And then what's that? More stripes? I was actually gifted this, and by gifted I mean I saved it from getting thrown in the trash while I was at my costume shop job. And I have yet to use it for anything because I very much forgot that this existed. And then just so many other sheer fabrics. I don't understand. I mean, I don't dislike polka dots, but this feels excessive. And then whatever this other shape is, like, this ain't me. I'm sure it was just in a remnant bin at the thrift store and was very inexpensive, and I was like, must have it because cheap. What a deal! Except I'm spending money that I don't need to be spending otherwise. And you can tell as I was working through this part of the pile that I was losing steam. And this is the point where Bert was getting quite bored and just started chasing me around and barking at me when I wasn't doing his bidding and not throwing his toys. So then finally we broke for lunch and I took him out to walk around for a little bit and enjoy the sunshine. I did end up startling some ducks that were outside the door, meaning they also scared the shit out of me because I was not expecting there to be 2 mallards right outside the door. and it was a little couple, and they were just going for a little stroll, working their way over to the pond, and it was really sweet, other than them hissing at me a little bit. Did you know ducks hiss? It's not the first time I've been hissed at by a duck. And then I even stopped taking notes, so I'm trying to just remember what I was looking through earlier. And there was some muslin, which the intention of buying this was for mock-ups. But because it's in this bin, I never look there for mock-up material because this is where all my nice stuff goes. So I've had this yardage for probably 6+ years, and it's never once been used for anything. So I finally put it in the bin where I have all of my mock-up fabric. Actually, I mentioned my flamingo outfit earlier. The mock-up for that used some very wild prints, and that's a perfect use for this kind of material, as long as it's similar weight to what I'm using. Like, I know muslin refers to type of material, just like a colorless, very inexpensive, whatever kind of fabric, but it's also the term for like the first mock-up, that's called a muslin as well, which is also called a toile. But then there's a print of fabric that's called toile. That's like the French curtain fabric, the very rococo, is that the term for it? That style painting, like French Riviera fabric, if that makes sense. There's a lot of intermingling terms. And because the battery was dying, I figured you didn't need to watch me cut out plain black quilting cotton and white and some of these other basic colors. So here are the swatches, so you can see what colors I do have, because I think that's part of the fun of this, is showing the collection. But you've seen me cut and fold enough fabric today, I think. I also decided, because I made so much room in the bins, to add my canvas fabrics that I've used for making some heavy duty like duffel bags and messenger bags to these bins, because I had them tucked in with like the fleece and the flannel, and it's just not a good spot for them. We're having them here, and having little swatch cards gonna make all the difference, because I very much forget that those exist. There are a couple other things I didn't show, but it's because I have these like specific project bags with specific materials inside of them. So for my Ramona Flowers subspace bags, I have 2 colors of canvas, but they sit in their bag with the material invisible to my eye, because it's just tucked away in the corner of the shop for when I get around to making those. But I never think to get around to making those because I never see the material. But I don't want to put it back with the regular fabric because it's meant for a specific use, if that makes sense. So having a little swatch card in the pile with everything else will, sure, let me use something if I need a small piece for a specific project, great, but also just remind me, hey dummy, don't forget you have this in the corner that you want to work on at some point. So just visual reminders of other things. And then while I was on my velvet frenzy, that red sheer fabric that didn't end up going back on the bolts ended up going in this bin, which is where all the other small bits of lace and sheer fabric went, because I kind of had them scattered all over the place. But guess what got little swatch cards? I did it for all of them, and then I also just made a note at the bottom that these are in the black bin, meaning not on the bolts. Ooh, which reminds me, the velvet cards, those are in a drawer and also not on the bolts, so I need to make that note on there too. And yeah, this is them all tucked into their little accordion file. I would love to know how you all organize your stuff, and would you like to know why I get to be such a mess most of the time? Is because everybody over on Patreon, you let me be the chaos monster that I am and spend time organizing things like this to try to reduce the chaos, both in my head but in my physical space, where I spent 7 hours doing only part of my fabric organization. I still have 2 at least entire types of fabric to go through, and there's bins and cabinets. Like, there's so much of it. It's probably going to take another day to do that, to be honest. Definitely not stressed about it at all. It's fine. But I wouldn't be able to set aside time to do this and show you all the process if it weren't for all the Patreon folks. So thank you so much for letting me do stuff like this. It is just the coolest thing in the world. And this little guy is getting real keyed up. I think he knows his birthday is in a couple days, so he's extra demanding attention. Actually, it's time for our walk, and he will not let us delay 1 more minute. So we will see you back here with another video next Friday. Thank you so much for hanging out. And then the time has passed, the walrus said, to speak of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax and cabbages and kings. And while the sea is boiling hot and whether birds have wings, Kalu Kalay will sing today of cabbages and kings. Why is that in my brain, but I can't remember stuff I have like invested money in and saved up for to then sew with and been excited about? Why is this how my brain works? I'm sure I messed up some of the words, but that's my little gift to you for watching till the end. You're welcome.